President Obama lambasted Donald Trump for claiming the election is rigged. Let's watch, and then I want to come back and break it down.
I have never seen in my lifetime or in modern political history any presidential candidate trying to discredit the elections and the election process before votes have even taken place. It's unprecedented. It happens to be based on no facts. Every expert, regardless of political party, regardless of ideology, conservative or liberal, who has ever examined these issues in a serious way will tell you that instances of significant voter fraud are not to be found, that, keep in mind, elections are run by state and local officials, which means that there are places like Florida, for example, where you've got a Republican governor who's a Republican appointees are going to be running and monitoring a whole bunch of these election sites. The notion that somehow if Mr. Trump loses Florida, it's because of those people that you have to watch out for, that is both irresponsible and, by the way, doesn't really show the kind of leadership and toughness that you'd want out of a president. If you start whining before the game's even over, if whenever things are going badly for you and you lose, you start blaming somebody else. And so I'd advise Mr. Trump to stop whining and go try to make his case to get votes.
So I have a lot to say about this. In many ways, I love what he said there, and I think he's totally right. And in many ways, I hate what he said, and I think he's totally wrong. So let me explain what I mean. First, I'll say where I think Obama's right. So is there evidence of a literal rigged election? No. Trump is saying it's rigged because he's massively down in the polls at the moment, 5.5 points on average, and he's basically protecting his fragile ego, and he wants an excuse for his likely loss. So it's a defense mechanism. That's what's happening. Furthermore, as Obama kind of alluded to there, but I'll give you the specific numbers here, there are 33 states in the country with Republican governors. Only 17 are Democratic. So this idea that, well, it's going to be rigged. Yeah, but hold on. The Republican Party is in control of 33 states. More than half of the states, the Republicans are in control. It's not even possible logistically for the Democrats to rig it in that sense. So how can a Democrat rig a wholly run Republican state? They just can't do it. It's not possible. Okay. On top of that, dude, this has been studied. So Loyola researched every election from 2000 to 2014, 1 billion votes cast. There's only been 31 instances of voter fraud. That means 31 out of a billion. That means you're more likely to be hit by lightning twice than have voter fraud. So Obama's right in saying he's got no facts. The facts are all on our side. And on top of that, the only evidence we've repeatedly seen when it comes to the issue of problems during the election is Republican governors in general elections cutting voting time or passing voter ID laws to try to suppress the turnout. Because when you suppress the turnout in a general election, that helps who? The Republicans. The more people vote, the higher the turnout, the more likely the election is to go Democratic. So lower turnout, more likely to go Republican. So they came up with all these tricky ways to try to do that, to try to suppress the vote. So, yeah, Obama's right about all that stuff. Now, where is he wrong? Well, he's wrong because there's still an element of bullshitting in what he's saying, because he knows there's some fuckery going on. Now, he's trying to make the case that nothing's wrong ever with the U.S. election, so shh. But that is kind of bullshit. So, for example, Hillary's campaign is colluding with the media. That's been proven. WikiLeaks documents, the internal emails, we know they're real. Many people saying from different outlets, oh, hey, is this okay if I run with this piece? Talking to, Hillary's top campaign people. There is collusion with the media. There just is. Now, look, I would argue even with the collusion with the media, they're not being hard enough on Donald Trump. But they're certainly not being hard enough on Hillary Clinton either. So this idea of nothing to see here, no, there is media bias and media collusion. Now, that's not technically part of a, quote, rigged election, like a literal rigged election, but it does show there's some fuckery, and it's not like there's nothing to what he's saying. Okay, furthermore, dude, the DNC did put their finger on the scale against Bernie Sanders in the primary. There's no denying that. That's been proven not only from the stories at the time, but also from WikiLeaks later on. For example, they hid the debates. They did that on purpose. They cut the voting time in pro-Bernie districts. I know because that happened here in my state, in New York. They closed primaries. Closed primaries were much more likely to go to Hillary Clinton because Bernie had more independence. And so they tried as much as possible to, keep the system as leaning in Hillary's direction as possible. Debbie Washman Schultz talking to the media, bullying the media, basically saying, oh, you said bad stuff about us on air, and I'm going to talk to your boss. This was all uncovered in emails. So, yeah, maybe rigged is too strong a word, but you definitely could say they put their finger on the scale against Bernie and for Hillary, and they're for the establishment. And they're trying to do that in the general. Again, the simple makeup of the breakdown of the states and how many are Republican run make it impossible for them to rig the general election. But of course, there's fuckery going on behind the scenes, not just with the DNC. I'm sure of it with the RNC too, as I told you how they've tried ways to suppress turnout. So again, there is fuckery going on, and Obama's given this sense of no, there's nothing ever wrong. And then on top of all that, there's an argument to be made that money in politics in and of itself is effectively rigging a system. Because what happens? Well, you have billionaires and multinational corporations giving money to politicians. Those politicians get to run the most ads, get their name out there the most because they're the richest. They have the most backing them. So they get to get their name out there. They're more likely to get elected. And then when they get in office, they snub their constituents and they help the billionaires. That's an open conspiracy. That's an open way of rigging it. So again, this idea of I get the sense from Obama of him saying you're besmirching the process. No, the process besmirched itself. The process is old and dumb and antiquated, and there's legalized bribery and corruption in it, and there's collusion with the media, and there's all these problems. And again, the sense I get from Obama is he's saying Trump's totally talking out of his ass, when the reality is he may be talking out of his ass, but he's still stumbling upon a kernel of truth in there, even if it's inadvertent. You see what I mean? So yeah, he's just protecting his ego, and he's just talking shit, and he's trying to make excuses for when he probably loses. But there are real serious things that need to be addressed in how it functions. And for fuck's sake, Al Gore versus George Bush. Hello? Al Gore won the election by 500,000 votes, popular vote, and lost the election. That's the problem of the Electoral College. But furthermore, Jeb Bush was the governor of Florida at the time. George Bush is governor, and he's like, oh, look at that, George Bush wins. Everybody's like, oh, nothing weird here. We have dynasty families. No, nothing weird here. Nothing going on. Totally pure and good democracy. And I haven't even gotten into old stories about the Diebold voting machines and how they can be fucking hacked and yada yada. But anyway, look, bottom line is, he's wrong in many respects, but there's also a kernel of truth in what he's saying, and that should be acknowledged as well.